Welcome back guys to another episode of Tough Garage. We're going to be continuing the work on the rear bar. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of thinking, trying to get my head around how I'm going to go about this modification on the rear bar. Being a plastic and not a metal, it's a little bit tricky, but I think I've found a solution. Let me see what you think. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to slice it along here. So I'm going to cut along there, just right on that corner piece right there. What goes here, guys, is a chrome molding. On the S-Packs, it's actually got a black molding. I don't know if you can see that there. Yeah, but on the Ls and GLs and the gears and whatever, they had a chrome molding that went along that little indentation there. It just runs all the way along, and then it tucks away in the corner, goes behind the bar, and then the little screw sort of holds it in place. So by cutting along there, the molding will pretty much hide the cut in case it's a little bit rough or whatever. But I think if I slice along that edge there and then come down here that way, what I'm thinking of doing is moving that whole section back. So instead of it sitting there, I want it to sit 15mm further back there. So by moving that, in turn, it makes this shorter. Okay, so then the only other mod that needs to be done, the brackets can stay. I'll probably need to make 2 new holes for the brackets to tuck the bar even further. And the only mod that needs to be done here for the brackets to tuck is to slice a little bit here. So this section here, what happens is the bracket seems to hit like that, okay, and it doesn't allow it to go any further in. But if there was a little notch there, then the bracket goes in further, and lo and behold, that section there is actually 18mm. So it'd be perfect. It'd give me a 3mm gap, and the bracket wouldn't actually touch this area here at all, and gets the 15mm shorter that I'm after. Well, easier said than done, I guess, eh? Let's get into it. Okay, I've made my cut. It's a little bit hairy going here on the ends, but it's okay. It's all got to be cut further back and neatened up. So it doesn't really matter. What I've done in the meantime, I haven't shown you guys because it was just boring footage, is I've had to sort of reshape and sand that area until it's the thickness basically of this area here. So from here to here, so from there to this flat there, I've grinded that area down so that it's down to that same thickness. What I'm thinking of doing is, once this is put back in here and then goes down, you know, the 15mm that I want to take off the depth of the bar, it'll sort of sit flat on this area here. So the bar's got a slight little taper down. See how it sort of bends down towards this edge a little bit. So I've got to make sure that when I glue or plastic weld this section that holds the little chrome molding back onto this area here, it's not flat with this, it's actually flat as in level flat, if you know what I mean. So it's got to sort of point up a tiny bit because that's the way it's sat on the bar. So the way this sits, see, if you look at it from there, see how that area here sits flat, and then from here sort of tapers down a tiny bit. I've got to make sure that when I plastic weld it on, it's not actually leaning at that angle and it's actually sitting flat. It'll be a little tricky, but you just got to sort of clamp it or something as you plastic weld it so that it stays at that correct position. So what I've got to do now is measure with the calipers perfectly 15mm off here from this face, and see what that measurement is. Because the cut's a little bit rough, it could be less in some areas already, so I've got to make sure that I make a scribe from here, and that line and that measurement is perfect all the way along, and I can cut to that sort of distance. Once the 15mm off, actually it's got to be less than 15mm, so it's got to be 10mm, and then whatever thickness that is, so that can actually sit on there. So what I might do is just plastic weld it on while it's still there, and then if I need to take that thickness away, which I probably won't need to, considering that this is so wide, that's probably about 25mm wide, then it'll still clear anyway. So it's just basically, I'm just basically moving this further to here, and making it look like it's been shortened, but it actually hasn't. It's just, I've just sort of moved its position. But yeah, not bad. So far, not bad. Nothing's gone wrong. Woohoo! Oh, before I forget. So what's actually even more important is that I do this part now. So do this mod, which I want to do is remove this sort of recess for the tow bar, and this section here, so that it mimics, you know, something like this, more like it, before I go cutting things back or welding sections on, because this little bit here, it could sit there, and this is in the way, so I've got to make sure that, you know, there's no little lumps and bumps that are in the way. So yeah, I've got to do that. I've ordered the new flush reverse light. I didn't actually go with an XF Falcon one. I went with something that's off a Land Cruiser actually, a little bit more modern and completely flush. It should be smaller even. It should be around about that size. So I'm going to have to wait for them to come in, see what size they are, make the recess for them before I know where this is going to sit in accordance, so that I'm not completely covering the actual light, obviously. I can start cutting this out though. Alright, let's get cracking. So now that I've made a dirty great big hole in the bar, we need to fill it. You know how it goes. Fill those holes, boys. Fill those holes. Anyway, this bar here was donated by a good mate, Jesse. It was surplus to him. It was, I don't know, he just didn't need it, and he donated it to the build. Man, I love you, Jess. You're a fucking legend, mate. Thank you very much for this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this section out here that I've marked out. The hole is 2600. I've made this 2700 just so I can make it a perfect fit and just slowly ease my way into the hole. Just slowly, boys, just slowly. And then once I've cut it, it seems to need a small sort of bend in the center. So let's see if we can capture this. Oh yeah, you can see that. See? So it's got like from the center of the bar, it's sort of it's a sort of meeting point there, and then it bends back out. So it comes in and then slightly out, just the tiniest bit. So you can't put a straight area there because it'll look stupid. So it'll create a high spot here and a high spot there. So what I'm planning on doing is just slicing it really neatly with the 1mm cutting disc, and then folding. Because it's plastic, it should fold within itself, and then re-welding that end here, and it should give me that perfectly nice, neat crease, and that'll work really nicely there. All right, let's cut this bit out. Okay, I'm easing my way in, boys. Slowly, slowly. You don't want to go too hard straight away. They don't like that. So just ease my way in, sneak up on it like a bit of a rapist, and we'll finally get in there. Get in that hole. Alrighty, looks like I've got it. Fits really nice actually. So what I've done, I've cut down the center. So I've marked the center of the bar and I've cut down the center at the back as well, as you can see in the other top. So this is the bottom of the bar, I've just flipped it over. So what that's done is it hugs the sides really nicely now, and it's created a very slight little ridge, which is what I was after. Not really a ridge, just like it's like a little hump, I guess, there, you know, because that's the actual shape of the bar. It sort of comes round and curves there, just slightly. So that's allowed it to meet up really nicely at these two ends and create that shape. Otherwise it would look funny, and you can just keep chasing your towel trying to get it to fit right, whereas it was never going to be the shape. So that looks much better. Now I've got to try and plastic weld it in and see how that goes. Might try out the new tool. Alrighty, that's fitting really nicely now. I just took all the paint off just so I can sort of see what I'm doing a little bit better. The next thing I think we need to do, because these bars bend and warp quite easily, I'm gonna have to find a way to frame this thing. They've just got these little, where is it? These really dodgy braces that they put behind them. So that's the little piece, so you can see where the bolts that are actually part of the rear bar come through there. Wiring can go through here, and then they've got this area which was for the absorption pad or whatever that they had behind there, and it's just a flimsy piece of, it looks like maybe 1 mil, 1.5 mil, you know, sheet metal. It's not much at all, and it bends really easily, so it's not going to support it at all. So it needs to be thicker than that. Similar design, but what I'm thinking is going a step further. This is just some bar that I had lying around, but lo and behold, it fits in the area perfectly. So that fits in there nice between their ribbing that they've put on there for strength. So I'm thinking of doing something like that, filling all of them and then welding that other plate on top, like make another one and weld it on top, so it actually keeps them all in their shape. Make sure it's all perfectly aligned, obviously, before I weld it, and make up a piece like that. I think that's going to be the best bet, because see, like that's got to close up there. It's too far apart. On the ends here it's pretty good, but here it's way too far apart, so you'd have to try and, I don't know, epoxy it and hold it down and let the epoxy dry so that it's actually clamped down and part of all the frame. I'll work it out, but that's what I'm thinking, something like that. So I'm going to have to go to the metal suppliers and get some of that bar. It looks like 20 mil by 20 mil. Okay, so a little while back I bought this little plastic welding unit that puts these hot staples. You guys would have seen them. They're very popular. It comes in a little kit like this with a little carry case and all the different sorts of staples. So for, you know, external corners, internal corners, and then, you know, bridging two bits together, thinner pieces. It's pretty cool. I just gave it a go on the bar, just on the corners here, just to get this section tied in roughly, and see how it sort of works. The only issue I can feel at the moment is the plastic itself. I've cooled it off with the blower, the air gun, and it still seems to be sort of soft. It's like, it feels like silicon. So I don't know how it's going to go, you know, how the end product's going to be, if it's going to stay sort of slimy and gooey, because it's a weird sort of really old plastic. I'm going to continue on and persist with it, and if need be, once it's sort of all held and braced with the metal, I'll trench it and put some sort of two-part epoxy in between, or a panel bond or something, and see how I go. But okay, so here's where we're at, guys. I've made these frames or bases for the bar. So it's basically just a frame or a base that goes and hugs this area, which is where the bumper bar bracket goes. So the bumper bar bracket mounts onto here and lays flat on that plastic there. So I've spaced it out because it's actually deeper on this side than it is on this side for whatever reason. So I had to use different thickness plates on the back. And what it does, it just basically sits like this. Okay, and then the bracket goes on top, and once it's bolted down, it clamps the whole area together. The next piece are these bars here. So these bars will sit inside the bar here. The other one will go there. And then once they're welded together, the bar won't be able to move or sag or anything because the whole thing will be welded together. So if it wants to twist or anything, it won't be allowed to. So that's the whole idea, is to keep the sag out of the bar, so that once I glue this section in, epoxy it back in, it's not going to shift on me at all. Have a look at this contraption to keep it flat. Okay, so this is where I'm at. I've made this base as a workable area because the bench isn't long enough for me to hold the whole bar. I had to make another nice, straight and sturdy sort of bench top that just sort of clamps on. So I've just clamped it at the end there. It's made out of angle bar and some MDF, so this sort of just clamps down the MDF so the MDF doesn't pop out or flex out of place, and it holds the bar nice and straight. So what I've done at the moment is I've got a set of other spare bars. One of them, that one there, it's in really good nick, so I used that as a template, and I've marked there around like a perimeter all the way along to see where this needs to sit. So I've marked it all over the place. So the way it's clamped now is in the position it needs to be. So if you look down the end of it, see it's got that sort of curve. So it needs to have that when I glue this middle section back into place. So, you know, it's a makeshift sort of hold everything in place while it's drying the glue, you know, while the panel bond's sort of drying. I tried the plastic welding, it didn't do anything, not on this plastic, so that didn't work very well, so that was a bit of a fail. So now I've done this all holds everything in place. I'm just going to start gluing from the top here, get that top half sort of done, and then I'll flip it over and do the lower half and glue that. I just want to see how it all sort of sets and how it works, but this is just adding a little bit of weight to hold it all down so that it sits as flat as it can. Alright, wish me luck. Okay, so first attempt with the T-Rex seems to have gone well. I just squeezed it in between the joints, not too much, and then just sort of pushed it in place, you know, so sort of smooths it off so that it would ooze all the way through. It did ooze all the way through enough. Like there was a little bit of excess that I cut off with the Stanley knife here just to get it smooth again, because I'm going to give it another go over from the back side now. So I had the frame in place. I've taken the frame back out. It came out nice and cleanly. And seems to be holding the piece in place really well. It's not overly strong, it's a little bit flexible still, like a tiny little bit, but not too bad. So that'll be what I'll use as the main sort of glue or whatever to adhesive to hold it in place. I'll put a bit more of that on the back, and then on the front I'm going to have to use some sort of 2K plastic epoxy or something, because that's not going to be able to flex, because if it flexes it'll show up in the paint. So I need a different product for the front, but for the back so far, let me just put this up, we're looking good. So I'm just going to lay on a little bit more and continue on. So what I'm up to here is measuring the depth with, let me get myself organised. Okay, so measuring the depth of it with this setup. So I can see I've got a perfectly right angle every time. So whenever it rests against the bar, it's exactly the same all the way along. And then measured 80 mil, because it works out to be 95 mil, the original depth. Go 80 mil, and when it's in line with the back there, then I know I've got my depth that I'm after. So I've done that, then I've got a bit of right angle iron, bar, whatever, and clamped it on. I'm just testing, I haven't glued anything yet, and making sure that it's all even, so that the gap along looks like it's level. It's not, you know, going up and down all the way along like that. The bar seems to do that, so clamping it with at least one side solid seems to be working. I can't do both. I can't put another bar on the back, even though this one you can see there's something there, but further up there's ribs and stuff in the way, so I can't get a good solid length to help me at the bottom part. So for now that'll do. So the idea is now to put some T-Rex under it and then clamp it all off. It gives me enough time to move it and then set it all perfectly. So then the next bit is making sure that that top bit is level. See, we're close. It's not far off. So when I hold that bit down there that's poking up, then it goes dead level. All right, so I'm not going to worry too much about that, because as soon as I clamp that back down, it'll bend everything and seal the way it's supposed to seal, or sit the way it's supposed to sit, sorry. So yeah, that's the idea, guys. So I'm going to T-Rex it, clamp it up, and let it sit, let it set, and then do this other half, because we've got that slight bend in the center. So I can do one half and get it all set, and then I'll move the bar and do this whole half, so that allows me to set this to the right area here, clamp it all off, and that'll hopefully be all the center section of the bar all done. The other thing I've done is I've screwed through the bottom of the bar in multiple different spots where it was trying to lift up, so that it's just touching. So you can still see a little bit of daylight in some areas. It's not absolutely perfect, 1 mil here and there, but it's just enough to clamp it down and keep it as level as possible, so that when everything's all set, hopefully fingers crossed, it's straight, you know, so it doesn't need much filler work or whatever to make it look decent. I mean, these things weren't the best even from factory, but you know, I want it to look the best it can, I guess. Alright, let's glue this fucker up. Alright, here it is, first half all glued. Just gotta let it set now. All level, make the noise. Okay, it looks like it's worked. All the top chrome moulding sort of swage holder thing is glued in place. Looks really good. It's made a hell of a difference to the dimensions of it. Now what I'll do, I'll trial fit it onto the car and see where I'm going to lob off these sides. Okay, so after cutting the side, we've got our look. So I had to angle this area, sorry about that, had to angle this area a little bit more. It seems like it was there, so it looks like it blends differently as it tapers off to the end originally. So you can see here, this little bit sort of sticks out, you know, where it would have, that length would have sort of tapered off. And it would have flattened out a bit more towards the end. So I'm going to have to slice along the back here and see if I can close that bottom area up to meet this section now. But otherwise not too bad. Same with the top, is probably out maybe a mil and a half at the top, so I'll just give it a slice and see if I can curve that area flatter so it meets properly. But that looks a million times better so far. Very happy with it. Okay, that's the end all glued into place. Looks a million times better, don't you reckon, guys? Have a look at that. So much nicer. Not too long, not too short. Just right. So this is all bolted up in place at the moment. I ended up having to slice the center again and actually flatten out the bar because the curve, or that point that it had in the middle, which I was trying to follow from the original bar, didn't suit once the bar was hard up against the body. So once the bar was hard up against the body, it had a huge gap right in the center here. So I split it again and flattened it out a little bit more. It's still got a tiny little bend, tiniest little bend, but it's much better now. It looks a lot nicer, tucks in nice and close, and doesn't leave too big a gap. So I haven't quite adjusted the height of it yet, so how far up it's got to go. This body line here needs to follow that line there. So I think on this side, once you angle the bar up a little, it meets like that. But I haven't put any. I've got to make a new sort of bracket system on the back here, like the clips that used to go there. So see where that little square is? That's where the original clips used to go. Now they sit too far forward, so I'll have to just, I'm thinking of just putting a block of plastic on the back and tapping some thread and then putting some bolts from the inside, and that'll tuck it and keep it sort of stiff, you know. I mean, it's pretty stiff, you know, like that takes a fair effort compared to what they used to be, but it still needs something there. But so much nicer. Now it just needs final finishing off.